Hello again. Sorry if my microphone goes horrible at any point. It's gone bad on other videos. I really need to get a new one. Just haven't got round to it quite yet. This obviously carries on from the last video I did in Unity. In the last one we looked at scripting behaviours, well, general behaviour assets. In this one I want to look at sound assets and just bringing some basic one in, adding sound to this object. So when it moves, it's going to create a sound. Obviously, as stated before, this is very basic tutorial. If you're looking for something a bit more advanced, look at the Walker Boys tutorials. They're very good. I didn't pop the link. It's been flagged up a few times, so I'll make sure I do it this time. But they're very good. My tutorials, just to kind of reiterate previous stuff, a bit more of a breakdown of it, a bit of a slower pace. So yeah, it's basic tutorials. Let me just flag that up. Okay, anyway, at this point, if you've done the first two parts of this, you should currently have this sort of setup. So just to quickly reskim over it, you should have a ship in with a texture. You should also have a camera setup as well. If we have a look here, main camera, there it is. Let's get into it. It's set up in perspective at the moment. So the idea is that obviously it's kind of a bit like Star Fox, that kind of setup. You know, a game like that, sort of. Yeah, just to remind, I didn't make that ship. I got it from I can't remember the website now, but I have to put it in the links once again. It got flagged up that I hadn't done that, so sorry about that. But yeah, to the point, this video is going to cover sound assets. It's going to cover how to put sound into Unity and code it as well. But in order to do that, you're going to need to know a few things about variables, which so far we haven't looked at, but we have to for the purpose of this video. So before we go into any setup in here, I just want to skim over basic variables. There's going to be one that I'm not going to cover in the PowerPoint I'm going to show you, that will be in the script, because there's literally loads of different types of variables, but I'm just going to show you the typical ones that you'd normally see. Okay, so I'm going to skip on over to PowerPoint, where there's lots of fancy slides. There we go. So what is a variable, basically? So in short, a variable is a container or placeholder for a particular value. This could be text or numeric. So essentially, it stores data. It can be either in text or it can be a numerical value that it stores. I've kind of put it in context in the next slide. So, for example, imagine a variable is a folder, okay, and it's called family, right? There are 4 people in a family. Okay, just saying, you might have 5 people. Doesn't really matter. In this case, you have 4. There are 4 people in the family. Okay, and we put those 4 people in the variable family. That now means that family contains 4 people. So in code, this would look like so. Right? So first thing we have is var, and this declares that we're creating a variable. Second one, okay, this declares the name of the variable. Third one, I'll explain in the next slide what this actually is, but it kind of indicates the declaration of a certain variable type, okay? And the last one is the value that would be stored within families. So as with the last slide, we're putting 4 people into family, and that's what this would do. So what this part is, and this is what I really need to explain, because this section is probably the most important one, because this is where we declare what type of variable we are actually creating. Okay, so the types of variables, and you have to bear with me in this, I'm going to go through about 5 of them, I think. The first one we're going to look at is the int, just what you've seen on the other slide. So int stands for integer, which in short, by definition, literally means number. That's exactly what it means and stands for in maths. So therefore, an int is declared to store a numerical value with no decimal place i.e. if a number's 20.3, it would instead be read as 20. It would ignore any numbers after the decimal point. So it only works in whole numbers. Okay, so for example, I think as well, if I remember right, it doesn't round it up, it doesn't round it down. If this was 20.7, then it would still be 20. It would always just be this value here. Okay, so that's all there is to that. You can encode, make it round up and round down. You can do that, but that is for another day. Float. Okay, a float. Okay, is a variable that once again uses digits, but unlike its neighbour int, it allows for a floating decimal. Okay, so hence the name float. Now, floating decimal means like, you know, it doesn't stay in one place. Obviously, you can kind of deduce that from it. So, a floating decimal in maths is a number that contains an infinite amount of digits, and really can be as long as the sum requires. For example, we looked at 20.3 before. But this could be expanded to account for further digits for more accurate results, and may be printed as 20.343245 blah 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 blah, so on and so forth. It could literally go on forever as long as there is a result needed. So if you've got something that's got a lot of remainders, it's not a whole number, then it could go on for a long time. And there is a way in code that you can restrict the amount of decimal points it looks at. You know, but obviously if you just let it do its own thing, it's just going to go on forever and ever and ever and ever. But yeah, it's floats are used generally in code to give more accurate readings. So, you know, 20, let's say for example, I mean, a good example was if you compared int on the previous page to the float in this one. So we know that 20.3 would be a float, and we know that 20 would be the int. However, if an object is, let's say, on a grid, and it's 20.3 in coordinates, okay, we'd be literally snapping it back to 20. So it's not really accurate. It's, you know, it's not its absolute accurate position. You know, it should be 20.3. So, you know, this is where floats come in, is for accuracy. In fact, what they're mostly used in games for is, for instance, or what I've used it for is thumbsticks, because they work on a 0 to 1 basis. So if you're using something like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, all the way up to 1.0, you know, let's say, for example, if you move the thumbstick right, that goes from 0 to 1.0. And you can't do that with ints. It wouldn't work, because it would just go 0, 1. Or just stay on 0, to be honest. So you need floats to be more accurate. And really, it's got an enormous amount of you know, uses, but floats also tend to be more expensive in terms of memory. So you've got to be kind of careful. It can drop your FPS, and obviously, being an avid gamer as you are, you know what an FPS actually is. So I don't need to explain that, of course. The next one, Boolean. Some people who do 3D Studio Max will know this for a different purpose. Okay, in maths, this basically is a logic system, and it tests for truth values using either true or false, or 0 or 1. 1 is 0 in this case. Think of it kind of this way. Obviously, in your computer, everything works on ones and zeros, and it literally means it's like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of switches that, you know, do functions. These all work using Booleans. So it just says if something should be true, something should be false. And I've kind of tried to give an example down here. So a Boolean is generally used in code to test if something is occurring, or to create a gate to prevent an action being performed by checking it. So as an example, I put down here, if family equals 4, okay, so notice there's 2 equals here. I'm going to go into operand a bit more later on, in fact, because there's loads of different things. But basically this says when it's got equals equals, that means you're comparing it or checking it. So you're checking if it equals 4. If it was just equals, 1 equals, then that would mean you're telling it to be something, whereas this is just checking. So that's important to remember. I think I did go over it before, but if not, there we go. So if family equals 4, okay, so if the family has 4 people, full house equals true, right? So the house is full. Else, so in other words, otherwise, full house equals false. So if that doesn't equal 4, if the family only has 3, then instead full house will equal false. So full house would be a Boolean variable, just like set up exactly like this. So var full house dot dot Boolean, and then we just define it down here. Tell it what it needs to be. So you could then go on to do an action saying if full house equals true, do something. I don't know, hit one of the members. I don't know, something like that, or kick one out of the house. That would be kind of the idea of it. Maybe not quite that. That's probably a bad example, but never mind. Ignore me. Anyway, moving on. Second from last one is string. This one's used all over the shop. It really is. The string is very literally a line of text, such as an object name. So it's anything to do with text, really. You can have numbers in it, but it would only be read as text. So an example of a string would be like so. So I've kind of used 2 variables here. One called variable first name dot dot string, as you can see, and equals. And notice the speech marks. Right, all strings come within the speech marks if you're typing text. That's how it recognises it, and I better demonstrate that below. But variable first name dot dot string, okay, colon. I should just say colon string. That's easier. Equals Gene, okay, and then I've done last name as well in the same fashion and pools. So these are 2 separate variables. As the name suggests, you can string letters together, further like so. So let's say we had then a variable we created called full name. Dot dot string, and why do I keep saying that? Just say colon mark. Get with it. Equals first name. Okay, so we're referring to the variable here. Plus, so whenever we add something, okay, it means it's creating a string. So plus, and this one's just empty speech. So this will leave a gap between the first name and the last name. Otherwise, it would literally just have no gap, no space, so that creates a gap, plus the last name, which we know is Paul, and the result produced would be Jean Paul. Yes, I am going proper family on this. Anyway, okay, so hopefully you've kind of understood that. This is stuff you're probably going to come across in practice anyway. I'm just trying to make you aware of some of the variables before we get into this bit. This one particularly, you're not going to come across yet, and it's going to be a long time before you do come across it. Though, when we start adding things like enemies and stuff, arrays are going to come into play. So this one, an array of anything, is a collection of something. In coding, this is used to create lists of information, which could be objects or even information from other variables. So you can store variables within variables. Within Unity, arrays can also be set with specific values by adding the squared brackets to the end of a variable, like so. So I've kind of used this as an example. This is one way of doing it. This creates what is called it's a general array. Okay, so it's not specific to any type like this one is down here. This would only allow you to add string values to it, whereas this will allow you to add any object to it. So it's an object-based variable. This one is very limited. This would only contain strings, okay, and it would list them. So I'll demonstrate this better on the next page. Okay, so with this one, right, the array would be displayed like so. So if we added, just to go back a bit, if we added, let's say, some people to it, okay, so element 1 equals Hugh Jas, element 2 equals diarrhea, and element 3 equals charity case. Right, this is what it would be displayed like. Now, you wouldn't say element 1 and that would put it in. What you do is you do party 3, this down here, equals Hugh Jas, and that would put it into element 3, for example. Bad example should have said party 1 equals huge ass, and then that would put it into element 1. But this is generally how it would be displayed to you. It'd be a huge list where it'd say element 1, element 2, element 3. And eventually you are going to come across this. This is not the clearest example of arrays. You really need to see it to understand it, and you need to use them. But if you grasp even a tiny bit of this, then that's kind of result. These could be assessed by typing the name of the variable and then the number in squared brackets. So typing party and then that's 3 would print charity case. That's what it would print. If you put print and party 3, like so, it would print charity case. So that's kind of what arrays are used for. In games tend to be used for things like parties and stuff like that. If you add in people to let's say in a turn-based strategy, then it would be adding people to your party. Otherwise, it could also be used to store inventory. What items do you have, so on and so forth, things like that. Weapons in the game, all sorts of different things, and then you can link that to then to stats as well. So arrays are used left, right, and center, but they, as I said, they kind of really need to use them to fully understand them. So it's something that you'll come across later on. I won't worry about it too much if you haven't understood it quite yet. Okay, so as a summary, okay, an int is a single digit number. Okay, float is a floating decimal number. Okay, a boolean, truth value, so true or false, 0 or 1. In Unity, it recognises it as primarily true or false. Family, string. Strings are just lines of text. And arrays creates and stores a list of data. Okay, and that is that. Okay, so that PowerPoint you can find, not just yet, but I'll probably put that on SlideShare, but there's plenty of resources out there for you. Let's crack on with this. So down here, you can see that I've brought an MP3 in called Thrusters, and we can play that here. So hopefully you can hear that. And I've turned the sound on. If not, epic fail, but otherwise, whatever. I've also created a folder for it, so to remind you, if you go create and create folder, then you can create a folder for that. I named it sounds and drop Thrusters into it. So, keep things nice and neat, it's important. So, as mentioned earlier, we're going to create sound in this, and there's a few things we've got to go through in order to achieve that. First thing we're going to do is on the ship itself. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a component, an audio component called an audio source. Okay, and this will be our first audio source, and we're going to add loop to it. And just to explain this, if we take that, our thruster sound, and drag it into audio clip, what this will do is it should, because it says play on awake, it should play the sound when we play the game. There we go. And if we turn off playing on awake, it won't play at all. Okay, until you would restart it with playing awake on, and then it would do it. We've also got loop as well. Turning that on, it stops the loop. Otherwise, it would just go on forever and ever and ever. We've also got other options down here: volume, pitch, so on and so forth. This sound, this audio source we're going to use to generate our thruster sound, our higher volume one. And there is a specific order to it, but I believe you can change the priority in order to control that. This will become more apparent later on. So let's delete that one. So select it, press delete key. That gets rid of it, so it's all blank now. And we can leave that be for the time being with the settings we have. Not with mute, of course. And we can now hop on over to the script. And at this point, you should have something that looks like this. And if I just update that, when we press play, it should be a case that you can move in all directions like so. Okay, and that's what you should have. I mean, obviously this carries on from the last video. But what we need to do is we need to add or incorporate what we just kind of picked up from that PowerPoint. There are some variables that I think I just mentioned that we won't that you won't have just seen, but that's because they're specific to Unity. So I'll kind of introduce that as we go. But the first thing we need to do, the first thing we need to work out is whether the ship is moving or not, because we know it's moving, we can see that, but the computer doesn't actually know, or the script doesn't actually know that the ship is moving, so we can't really test or tell it to do anything. And this is kind of the first mistake I think a lot of people make when it comes to trying to get looping sounds. You know, they kind of overcomplicate it an awful lot, and what they end up with is a constantly duplicating sound. It sounds horrible. So first thing we need to work out is the ship moving? This is also something useful to know or to use anyway. So we've got to create a variable. So at the top, var, and it's going to be called ship moving. Okay, colon, I said it correct this time, boolean equals false, and semicolon. So what we've done there is we created a variable, a boolean one at that, so it's a true or false one, called ship moving, and it from the start is set to false. So when it's created, it will be set as false. It's like basically putting a light switch in, as you know, and creating it switched off, and then once you add power, you switch it on. That's what that is. It's a crap way of explaining it, but it does the trick. Okay, so the next thing we can do is we need to tell it to turn on. So we need to tell it to become true, and we want it to do this whenever a key is pressed. So in our if statements here, underneath we need to add ship moving equals true. Okay, ship moving equals true. We can copy that, and we can paste it into all the others. So that means whenever a key is pressed, ship moving will equal true. Now at this point, if we build it, build it's all good, and run it, okay, you see ship moving has appeared over here, and I realise how much that me saying ship moving is going to sound like I'm saying a naughty word over and over again. I would like to stress that I am actually saying ship with a P, or am I? Anyway, so ship moving has appeared here. If we actually move, you can see that it becomes true, but it doesn't switch back to false when we stop. So if I tick it there and play it in, you can see it goes true, but it doesn't go false, which is a problem, of course. So this is something we need to continue working on. Right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to say that if none of these keys have been pressed, right, then ship moving will equal false. Okay, that's the next thing we've got to do. So the way some people might do this a different way, there's probably people out there who are quite good at this, or I don't know why you're watching this video if that's the case, because this is a beginner's tutorial, an absolute beginner's at that. But this is the way I would do it. Okay, so if we go an if statement, okay, and then let's copy that there. Okay, actually, we want that extra bit as well. Copy that, and we're going to first add an exclamation mark in there, and then paste that in afterwards. Now, the exclamation mark, let me explain why I've done that, because that looks like I've just added something in randomly, pointlessly, and you'll probably go, well, he hasn't done that up here. The reason is because this basically says, of course, if the key is down. If down key is down. This, on the other hand, by adding the exclamation mark, says if the key is not down, then do something. So that's essentially what it means. So what we can do now is by going, let's change that to left. Let's start with left so we can work our way down. So we need to say now, as well as left key, we need to also say and right arrow and up arrow and down arrow as well, if they're not pressed. And the way we can do and, we don't need to do it in a separate if statement, though we could. Instead, we can use that, two and symbols, and this means and. And then what we do is we repeat the process. So input, key, let's change that to right instead. Okay, so now we have if left key isn't down, and if right key isn't down. So we keep doing that, repeat that again, paste that in, make that up, and same again, and ends that parenthesis, and open that, so open that bracket so that it opens the if statement. Then we can add an action. So if it's not been pressed, we want ship moving to equal false. Ship moving equals false. We can now build this, and we get an error. The reason is because I haven't added an extra one for update on the end. So add that. There we go. 2 warnings. We'll ignore you. Probably shouldn't, but will. Run the game. Okay, and now you can see that ship moving turns off. There we go. So now we've kind of got it set up for sound. So the next thing we will do is we need to set up a variable to bring sound into our game. So in order to do that, and this is where a variable that you won't have seen before, as said, is a variable that is Unity specific, although other game engines might have something similar, and other scripting languages might have something similar as well. But I think probably Java does have an equivalent. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not even going to lie. I don't know. But in this case, it's going to add sound. So if we go variable, and we're going to create one called thrusters, right? And colon and audio clip, and end that there. And what this will do is this will add an extra tab here, just like it has for ship moving, but it will allow us to add a sound clip to that variable. And then what this will also do is this will allow us then to play it from down here. So let's kind of do that. I mean, I'll just quickly build that so you can kind of see it, add it in. So it should pop up just there. There we go. Thrusters, yeah. So what we can do is we can drag the sound file at this point into there. So now thrusters variable equals thrusters sound. Ooh yeah. Giggity giggity. Right. And now we can start building or telling it to play when ship moving equals true. So let's knock that down a line. We now need to create another if statement for that. So if, okay, ship moving equals true, because remember we're comparing here. That's why we're doing that, or we're testing. So we use 2 equals true. Okay, and then I was going to say to test if the audio is playing, but do you know what? I'm actually going to not do that yet. There's a reason why I won't do that yet. It's because this is the #1 problem that most people have. So I'm going to leave that out for now. We're going to go audio dot clip, okay, equals thrusters. So it's going to equal our variable up there that has the sound in. And what this will do, this will plug it into our audio source here on command. And we're going to go audio dot play. Play. Okay. So add an extra bracket on the end so it does it for update. build that, and that should now rerun that. Okay. And you can see that it breaks up if I keep the key down. That's quite important to know, actually. The reason it's doing that, and you can also see that it goes on forever and ever and ever. It doesn't stop as well when we stop. So that is another issue that we've got to work on. But basically what it's doing at this point, because we haven't told it to test and see if a sound's already running, because obviously you don't want a thruster to constantly keep repeating or trying to start over and over and over again. You want the same one to finish and then loop as long as the keys are pressed down. That is the problem. Every time it updates, it's reading this again and it's playing the script over and over and over again, multiple times every second. So you get this broken up sound where it's trying to restart the sound file each and every time. So it's a very easy fix for this. We create another if statement, and we're going to do an exclamation mark, which immediately means, as you know by now, that we're checking if something is not something. Okay, so audio dot is playing, and I know this is kind of contradictory because if audio is playing, so we're saying if audio is not playing, it'd be easier just to presume that that would be like not. But that's not how it works. We have to put the exclamation mark to say this. Close that off. Okay, and we need to add an extra one in here for that. Wherever we create one, we have to put one in. And then this, we're already, it should solve that issue to some degree. It won't make it stop. We've got to work on that still. And there you go. So if I stop that, you can see that it no longer breaks up when we move, which is important. That's a great fix. Or first problem sorted. So let's pop back into MonoDevelop. So the next thing we need to do, and we've already got this partially set up, is to tell it to stop when we let go of the keys. Now we already have this set up here for ship moving equals false, and we could say if ship moving equals false, then stop the sound. But we could also just put it in here, which is just as easy. And I would like to point out, you could put this code in all of these keys here. There is other ways. I think this is where people might have a go at me and say, why are you doing it that way? But just bear with me, alright? Audio dot stop, open bracket, close bracket, done. Alright? And that is that. That should now stop it. We are sorted. That should now play and it should stop. Don't know why it froze there. Stop the keys and it stops the thrusters. Now obviously that's great, I think, but thrusters don't just stop like that. They'll keep running. They'll just increase when you're moving. So this is where we've got to add another audio source behind this one. So we're going to add another audio source in here, and we're going to drag thrusters into it. But we're going to drop the volume right the way down. So we could type in, let's say, 0.3 is probably a good volume. Select loop. Now let's play it. So that one's quietly running in the background. But then when we accelerate, as you can hear, it increases the sound. So once more. Job is a good one. That is it. Done. So, really, it seems to get easier every time I do this. Yeah, that's it all done. One thing I'd like to get... Oh, actually, do you know what? I'm so glad I like to point this out because I'm quite proud of myself. When I did this before, I accidentally misspelled this. So I'm glad. I should deserve a round of applause for not actually typing the... well, if you replace that letter with something else, I did do that during a tutorial. So I deserve a round of applause for not doing that, especially this late at night. Um, Anywho, another thing you should probably do, and I get into a bad habit of not doing it, is comment on your work. So, for example, with this one up here, this variable, we know this creates a variable, spanning error, that tests if the ship is moving. Okay? Alright, so that's it. That just says that creates a variable that tests if the ship is moving. And that's all it needs to be. And this creates a variable that basically has a sound attached to it, or can. Well, it creates a sound slot, actually. It creates a sound slot for the MP3. The MP3 called Thrusters. Obviously, do comments that are kind of recognisable to you, so you can read them easily. I don't think even that's not really brilliant, to be honest. But yeah, by putting double forward slash, I should have said, you can comment out, and this won't be read by the computer at all. So it's probably a good time to kind of comment these out so they no longer appear. Or otherwise, you could just delete them. You don't really need them anymore. But they will no longer now appear when you press the keys. Rebuild that. Quickly play. See? Nothing down there. All done. And yeah, that kind of concludes it. It's been an epic journey. We've laughed, we've cried, but we made it. So obviously, if anyone's run into any problems with this, then please feel free to comment. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Apart from this, I hope this has helped you beginners. I hope this has helped you advanced people if you just something you needed refreshing on. I seriously doubt it though. And by all means, I'm learning myself. So if you've got any improvement tips or anything like that you can share, please do. That's would be really helpful.